Reading with your kids.
Hola, niho, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni moni wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful and historic neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so honored and so wicked happy that you're joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show, and please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Audible, Good Pods, Podcast Addict, wherever you find your podcasts. We want to invite all the authors and aspiring authors who are listening to the podcast to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Please be sure to click on the Authors Click Here button at the top of the page to discover how we can help you celebrate your book with the entire world. Now, you know, if you are an author, especially an independent or self-published author, you probably had no idea that when you were writing your book and getting it published, you had no idea that once that book was published, that you became the CEO of a small business, your book business. Yeah, it is. It's a business now. And you had no idea that there are literally thousands of books published every single... You thought I was going to say year. No. There are thousands of books published every single month. It is so hard for a book to stand out in that crowd, especially an independent or sub-published book. But we would love to help you do that. If you visit readingwithyourkids.com and click on that Authors Click Here button, you will discover how you can be a guest here on the podcast. Being a guest gives you the chance to tell the world all about your book. It's fun, it's easy, and it doesn't cost you a thing. You can also learn about our Certified Great Read program. This is a program that has helped so many authors. You can also discover our monthly promotion program. We're really excited. We've helped so many authors to date, and we would love to help you. Please go to readingwithyourkids.com, click on that Authors Click Here button at the top of the page, and discover how we can help you celebrate your book with the world. Join us right now from New York City in New York. Our guest is here today to celebrate her brand new picture book. It looks fantastic. It's called My Block Looks Like. Please welcome to the show, Janelle Harper. Hey, Janelle, how are you?
Hi, Happy New Year. I'm well. How are you?
I am delighted. I'm really happy that you mentioned that it's, you know, we're recording this the January 2nd. It is the new year. I am thinking that 2024 is going to be an amazing year. I'm determined to make it an amazing year.
I agree. I'm so excited. And with My Block Looks Like being published on the 2nd, for me, it's just a great start to this year, and I'm just excited to see what else 2024 has in store.
Yeah. So let's tell everybody what My Block Looks Like is all about. This is your debut picture book, correct?
Yes, it's my debut picture book, and it is written in verse. And so it's a lyrical love letter to the Bronx, which is my hometown, born and raised, and I currently reside here. And it's a love letter to all the amazing people, places, and things that exist in this great borough, what I believe to be the greatest borough of New York City, despite the debate, but being the birthplace of hip hop, I think it puts us on the top of the list. But even if you're not from New York City or the Bronx, at the heart of the story is just about celebrating your community and everything that makes your community special.
You know, growing up in an inner city neighborhood of Boston, I can absolutely relate to the feelings that you have about the Bronx and the feelings you have about neighborhoods. I think a lot of folks, you know, if they grow up in a small town community where everybody knows each other, or a suburban community, they think that's community, and they look at the city and there's so many people, so much going on, and they think, well, there can't be a community there because it's just so much happening. But boy, I grew up in a really tight-knit community, and I think you did too.
Yeah, absolutely. The city is definitely huge, but we still have so much community. You'd be surprised. And so growing up and even my students and children in the neighborhood, you get familiar with people you see passing by or the same people you ride the train with at the same time of day. And even going into the bodegas in the corner store, we have so much community that the store owner knows who you are and they know your order. So there's definitely community even in this big city.
Yeah. Yeah, the corner store, that is, in my neighborhood, that was kind of town hall almost. That was where everybody went. The guy who owned the store, Big Al, just a really beautiful humanitarian. No one went hungry in the neighborhood, because if you went to the store and you didn't have enough to buy something that day, well, he just wrote your debt down, whatever you needed to get, on a little paper bag and put it into a drawer, and then you came back and you paid it when you could.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah,
The corner store is definitely, or the bodega, depends, your neighborhood, but it is definitely the heart of the neighborhood. Often your first stop in the morning or your last stop before going home. So you really get to build community. They get to know you and your family, and you get to know theirs as well.
Yeah. What was it, or was there something in particular about your neighborhood or about what you were going through in your life that inspired you to kind of write this homage to inner city life?
Yeah, so being from the Bronx and teaching in the Bronx, I was a dance teacher. So often I would go through different units. And for example, one of the units I would teach my students would be hip hop, but I wouldn't just teach them the dances. I would teach them the history behind it. And it always was so surprising to me that these students who were born and raised in the Bronx had no idea that hip hop started in the Bronx. Like, that would always be one of my first questions. Where did hip hop start? And they would name every other location but the Bronx. And these children were from the Bronx. And I was like, wow, there's so many amazing things and places and people that exist in the Bronx. And our children just don't know about it. And so I really wanted to change the narrative that they hear daily and let them know there's so many special things that are going on right in their hometown.
Yeah. I was, I'm almost 100 years old, and I certainly appreciate hip hop, but I wasn't aware that it was born in the Bronx. Can you share a little bit of that history?
Yes, so hip hop started in the Bronx, 1973. So this year was the 50th anniversary of hip hop. So all year, well, in 2023 was the 50th anniversary of hip hop. So there were a lot of amazing celebrations. I think the last one was the Grammys. They did a big televised celebration, but it started in the South Bronx, 1520 Cedric Avenue. And DJ Kool Herc and his sister threw a back to school jam in the rec room just to raise money for school supplies. And so that was the beginning of the history of hip hop.
And how would you define, I mean, when I hear it, I can say, yeah, I think that's hip hop. How did I do for an old white guy? But I mean, is there something that defines it that somebody can put your finger on and go, yeah, that's hip hop?
So a lot of people just think about it from a musical perspective, but hip hop is a culture. So we say that there's 4 elements of hip hop. We have the art form, which is graffiti, which is our street art. We have breaking, so our B-boys and our B-girls. We have MCing, which is our rappers, and that's where you get the music. And then you have our DJs, so the ones spinning the music. And so overall, it's about a culture, and this culture helps a group of people during a difficult time to not only survive and thrive. For many they thought it was just a trend. And here we are 50 years later.
So tell us a little bit more about My Block Looks Like. Who are we going to meet in this story?
So My Block Looks Like, you're going to meet a little girl. She doesn't have a name. So the beautiful thing about picture books is that I, as the author, come up with the words and then you release it to the illustrator. And so nowhere in the words that I particularly have a protagonist or a main character. But the beautiful thing about illustrators and what Frank Morrison did is that they add layers to the story. And so he was able to tell an additional story through my words and through his artwork. And so you're going to see a little girl and you're going to see her journey through her neighborhood. And she ends up going to a dance studio where she's auditioning. So you get to see her whole journey and all the people she meets and all the things she sees going to her dance studio for an audition.
Very cool. You know, as a dad of a young woman who's very successful now, but I think a lot of the success that she's been able to achieve in college and in her professional life was built, hopefully me and her mom had some contributions to it, but I think a lot of it was based on the discipline and skills she learned dancing. Because I can't say this enough. Dance is an incredibly difficult, intense, disciplined art form. It's wonderful. I'm so grateful that we discovered this. My daughter had a lot of it was very rambunctious. She was like walking at 9 months and running my wife crazy at 2.5 years. And my wife found a dance studio and kind of fibbed and said, she has to be 4? Yeah, she's 4. She's 4. Right in there. And she was dancing ever since. And so she's still dancing today. But the discipline and just the work ethic that she developed in those dance studios was pretty amazing. And I don't think we give dancers the credit that they deserve.
Yeah, absolutely. My mom put me in my first dance class at the age of 4, and I've been dancing ever since. So that's 35 years. So I spent, decades in the school system teaching dance. I'm also the director of the dance ministry at my church. So dance has played a pivotal role in my life, and discipline is definitely one, and perseverance. And I just remember all the hours in dance school, but then also coming home and rearranging my mom's living room and her furniture. And I didn't get that step in class and I have to practice. So I get it the next time I go. So yeah.
Yeah. I remember when my daughter was maybe 4. And I was like the other dads waiting outside the dance studio for her to finish and drive her home. The teacher came out and said, "Come in here." And I'm like, oh, what does she do now? And I just watch. And, the girls would go across the floor and work in a dance step. And they go across the floor and get to the other corner and then start talking to each other like little girls do, except for my daughter. She would go across the dance floor. And then after she finished, she would go up and down along the wall practicing the dance step on her own, getting it perfect. And the teacher just looked at me. She goes, "She's like that all the time."
Wow.
And and so it's just one of those really neat memories that no one out listening cares about, but it's something that was special to me. And so on behalf, I want to thank you, because I know that there are lots of dance dads and moms and uncles and aunts and grannies and grandpies that appreciate what you gave to their kids.
Yeah, it's a nice gift, and it also allows the parents and family members to see their child in a different light. So often I would have, send home letters to parents like, this performance is happening and, your child may need this or that. And they would call me back and email me back like, "I didn't even know my child was taking dance. What do you mean?" And especially I had middle school. So, it's sometimes the kids are bolts and it's hard to get information. I'm like, yeah, they've had dance with me for a year or 2 years. And they're like, what? And then like for them to come and see their child on stage and just see that different side of them, like they're always so grateful and thankful. So it's just a nice experience.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. Curious, as somebody who was teaching middle school kids, what was it that inspired you to write a book for younger kids as your debut?
So, I've taught a span of K through 12. And so for about 8 years, I was a K through 8 teacher. And so I spent a lot of time with the younger kids before I then transferred to a school that focused just on middle school. I don't know how it is in other states, but in New York City, there's a shortage for middle school. It is a challenging age range, and so a lot of people shy away from it. But I love them, and I know, they can be challenging and hormonal, but I love them. It's always an adventure. It's never a dull moment. But I've always also worked with younger kids, whether it was in school or out school with after school at my church. And so I just love kids in general, no matter the age.
One of the things that I read on your website is that representation is very, very important to you. Can you talk a little bit about why do you think it's important for kids growing up in an inner city neighborhood to see themselves in the pages of a book?
Yes, so representation gives our children permission to dream, and they don't know what's possible unless they see it. And so one thing I loved about being a teacher and speaking to elementary and middle school, even high school students, is just sharing my life, things that I'm just like, oh, this is just my day to day or normal. And the kids just being in awe, like, you have how many college degrees, or you travel to what continent? And then I realized, like, just having these conversations opened up their world, where it was like, if my teacher, who I see every day, can do this, then I know I can also do this. So for me, representation is important because it really just opens up possibilities for children.
I love that line, representation gives kids permission to dream. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how important it is for kids to dream and for us to encourage kids to dream?
Yeah, if I don't know it's possible, then I limit myself to what I see. So for some of our kids, they may not travel outside their community or out their block. And so all they know is what they see. But when we give them permission to dream, when we share our experiences, when we share books that are a window to other culture, other places, it expands their minds. It expands their ideas of what's possible. And sometimes I think as adults, we have our own filters, and sometimes we impose our own fears, and even we just need to allow kids to dream. And sometimes they come up with dreams that we couldn't even imagine for ourselves, which is beautiful, or dreams that weren't even possible when we were kids. I know I was an avid reader when I was younger, but the dream of being an author just wasn't, I didn't know any authors from the Bronx. And now I have so many friends that are authors, and I can share with the children, look, if you love to draw, you can be an illustrator. That's a real thing. Or if you love to tell stories, you can be an author. That's a real thing. Or if you love to dance. And so we just need to allow children the freedom to dream dreams and dream bigger than what we can even imagine for ourselves.
Yeah. It's interesting. You were talking about kids who, kind of their whole world is the block that they live on. And it's true, when you're in the city, there are so many things right there at your fingertips that you can walk to, and that's wonderful. But one of the things that's not so wonderful is that a lot of times that limits kids and limits adults, and so that their whole world is, in 3 or 4 blocks. Mm-hmm. And, it's so important to encourage our kids, no matter where they are, to understand that there's this big, giant, wonderful world that we are a part of and that we have a right to explore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the interconnectedness, and that we're not just, our community isn't just our block, right? We're a part of the country, we're a part of the world. And so our community gets bigger and bigger and bigger, even though we start with our home community, the people, we live with and grew up with, but then we have our block. And then we have, our state. And so just allowing them to have that knowledge that you have your community, but your community is very big. Mm-hmm. And you're a part of this great community. And you have a role in each community that you play.
Yeah. You mentioned it earlier on that, as an author, you need at some point when you're traditionally published to hand your book over to an illustrator and allow them that collaboration, although it's not direct. It's like you've created the story and then the editor passes it along to the art director who passes it on to the illustrator, and then a few months later you get the book back. Was it difficult for you to kind of let go of that part and to be comfortable with an illustrator helping to tell this story?
For me, it wasn't, because I trusted Frank. Frank Morrison is just phenomenal and he has an amazing reputation. And so I knew that my words were in good hands. And when I got back, samples of the illustration, I was just really blown away. So I'm not even sure if, Frank and I never had a direct conversation, like you said, and I'm not even sure if he knew I was a dancer. And so for him to put that extra layer, I was just like, wow. And I didn't even consider that to be like an additional layer to the story. And for so many people who don't understand how picture books are made, they think like, oh, the illustrator's just simply illustrating the words word from word, but it's not so. They're layering the story and adding an additional narrative, and that's what Frank did so beautifully in the story. So I was blown away when I saw he added that additional narrative of a child exploring their neighborhood and going through their daily life and going to pursue this dream of dance that they had. I didn't even conceptualize that for myself, being a dancer. And so it was just beautiful to have him do that.
Yeah. So what's next for Janelle Harper? I know the book is just out now. Is there another book in the works?
Yes, so there's another book in the works. This book was a part of a 2-book deal, so there is another unannounced book. So you will see another book from me, but I am just enjoying my block. Looks like being out in the world, and I have a couple of author events and story times throughout New York City in the next couple of weeks and months. So I'm just excited to see the children have the book in their hands, spend time with the kids reading it and seeing their reaction.
That's wonderful. Hey, Janelle, could you tell everybody, please, where they can go to find out more about My Block Looks Like and also find out more about you?
Sure. So you can go to JanelleHarperAuthor.com. That is my official author website. And I am also on social media at BX Storyteller.
We've had a great time speaking to the author of My Block Looks Like. It is the debut picture book from our guest, Janelle Harper. Hey, Janelle, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast and will join us for the next exciting episode of the show. We are so grateful that you're part of our beautiful Reading with Your Kids family. We'd love for you to connect with us on social media, Facebook.com/ReadingWithYourKids, at Reading with Your Kids on Instagram, at Jedley Magic on Twitter. If you are on LinkedIn, please connect with Jed Doherty. We also have a Reading with Your Kids page on LinkedIn. We would love for you to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Authors, click on the Authors Click Here button to find out how you can be a guest here on the show and find out how we can help you celebrate your book with the world. And also, parents, please be sure to visit readingwithyourkids.com to download our free online magazine. Hey, we want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we want to start by thanking our amazing guest. I also want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Chris Doherty, Ann O'Leary, Soji Franklin. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And thank you so much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.